socially necessary abstract labor is basically the amount of labor time that goes into producing a commodity. In societies where production for exchange was not yet generalized, forms of exchange like barter and gifting would be sufficient, because these are relatively one-off interactions, right? I take, I want a Nintendo Switch, so I trade 3 wheels of cheese for a Nintendo Switch. I can do that trade once. If I want to buy several Nintendo Switches, trading 3 wheels of cheese for each of them is not going to be very fun for me. So when relations of exchange become generalized, i.e. when I have to trade stuff that I have for stuff that I want as a rule of life, in other words, when the division of labor in society becomes such that production for exchange becomes commonplace, then the need arises for something that can stand in for the value of the commodities, rather than me having to make 3 wheels of cheese every time I wanted to barter for a Nintendo Switch. So, in order for exchange relations to become general, there has to be a commodity of a special type, a universal equivalent that is socially accepted to stand in for the values of all other commodities. Marx assumed this value, that this commodity is gold. So I'll talk about gold, but it's important to note that it need not be gold. All that's required is that it itself is a commodity that is produced using socially necessary labor time, and that it is accepted as a means of circulation. Basically, the universal equivalent is just a commodity that's generally accepted to be tradable for any other commodity. That's why it's universal. If you think of the dollars in your pocket, that's universal, at least in the context of the US economy, and actually the world over. Everybody accepts dollars. That's probably as universal a commodity as you can get. So the fact that the money commodity is produced as a commodity is central to the argument in Volume 1. Each ounce of gold is produced by a specific quantity of abstract labor involved in mining, processing, minting, and so on. So I no longer need to know how much my car or parts of my car will trade for a Nintendo Switch, a pair of sneakers, or a yard of linen. All I need to know is how much gold my car gets me, and how much gold will get any of the other things. So far, we have 2 features of the Marxist account of commodity money. It is a measure of value against which all other exchange values can be compared, resulting in a price, right? Each commodity has a price in gold or in dollars. But it also has a use value in that it allows for the exchange of commodities. Its use value is that it's a medium of exchange. The circulation of the actual commodity itself becomes quite irrelevant. I can keep my gold in a bank and instead trade paper bills that are convertible into gold, which is in fact what we would call the gold standard, which the United States was on. So technically, the gold standard was abolished for general use within the country around late 1800s. I'm blanking on exactly when. And then it was, the convertibility to gold was banned in 1971 with the abolition of the Bretton Woods Agreement. What about fiat money, which is not linked to the value of any commodity at all? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. Actually, spoiler alert, we won't. But I do hope somebody will bring it up in the Q&A. It's actually a very interesting debate in Marxist economics right now. So there's a third essential feature of the money commodity, the ability to, as Marx says, hoard and dishoard it, or if you're feeling charitable, save or spend. And in effect, commodity money provides a way to crystallize exchange value for use at a later time in a different place. This chapter is extremely Hegelian, so there's all sorts of weird, crystal stuff happening here. So it is from this that the second form of money emerges, credit money. Credit money is issued by a private or public institution and is basically an agreement to pay the holder of the agreement the holder of that agreement at a particular date. Think bonds or an IOU, basically exactly the same thing. You give me some money, I give you a paper that says, in a year, I'll give you that money back plus an extra $5 for your trouble. This agreement can be used as money in the same way that gold is, but is not subject to the constraints of having a physical quantity of gold. Over time, banks become centers of the circulation process of credit money, as the ability to create and destroy money like banknotes allowed for the coordination of large numbers of different capitalist enterprises. This in turn necessitated the need for national central banks, which themselves enforced the quality of the money created by private banks. So in volume 1, chapter 3, Marx sort of leaves it at that, for the purposes of talking about simple and expanded reproduction. The existence of the money commodity as the store and signifier of value is all that's needed, though he warns against confusing the circulation of money as capital and its circulation as mere money. What does that mean? Well, to do that, we'll go back to our familiar circuit of capitalist production. You have, on the left-hand side, you have money, a sum of money that's converted into fixed and variable capital, which is then converted into commodities, which is then sold for money. On the right-hand side, that's M prime. And if you are a good capitalist and you're excellent at extracting surplus value from your workers, M prime is going to be greater than M. The money you get in the end is going to be greater than what you started with. We sort of, usually when we talk about, starting with wage, labor, and capital and value, price, and profit, we sort of gloss over the M parts of this circuit. When it's really actually, the transition from M to C and C prime to M prime is actually quite important. We're going to get to why in a little bit. So what is this, if you are an enterprising young capitalist to be, you're not a capitalist yet, how do you get that initial M? You can start from, if you work for a wage, you could save your 10% of your paycheck every month and save it up for years and years and years in order to buy a factory for $20 million. That is extremely unlikely. More likely, you got it from a bank who issued you a loan for the startup capital. That is credit money. The bank charges you a rate of interest, and since there is competition between financial capitals, we can think of this as the average rate of interest for your given production process. Why? Because banks have to compete with each other, and they will compete to give you the lowest interest rate. So over time, the interest rate that you are charged by a bank will gravitate around an average rate of interest. The power of money makes the bank indifferent to what you're doing or making. All the bank cares about is the return on its investment, which is paid out of a portion of the surplus value that the capitalist extracts. So we modify our circuit a little bit just to make it explicit that M prime in the last slide is M, which is the initial quantity of money, plus small m, which is the surplus value that's generated during production. So the bank doesn't care how you do this, using what process or who you hire. The bank just cares about giving its money capital out and receiving it a greater sum in return, i.e. that sum plus interest. So 3 things to note here. In the social world, we think of interest as a property of money as money, rather than of money as capital. In accounting classes, I recently taught an engineering economics class, you'll hear about the time value of money. Future money is worth less than current money, which is worth less than past money. The nature of credit money obscures the fact that the source of interest is out of the surplus value generated by labor power in the process of production. So interest is not a property of money. Interest is actually a property of production. The second part is that credit money is created by the loan. Credit money that is created by the loan is now fictitious value. And if that money is advanced as production, then it is fictitious capital. Now, what does that mean? I've loaned you the money with the expectation that I will receive M plus I back at some later date.